I caught my husband kissing my best friend at our family picnic, and her husband smiled behind me and said, "Good. Now we can stop pretending we're the crazy ones." The strange part was that nothing around us stopped. Someone laughed near the cooler. A paper plate scraped across a table, and the same summer song kept playing from a speaker under the shelter. Everything stayed normal except my marriage, which ended while people were still passing lemonade. I had gone looking for Grant because Della needed help carrying another tray, and he had vanished after saying he needed ice. Sauvie Island was bright and warm, all yellow grass, cottonwood shade, paper napkins, grilled corn, and families trusting the day to behave. I followed the narrow path behind the shelter when I saw the edge of his navy shirt near the trees. Then I saw his hand on Brielle Foster's waist, her fingers locked behind his neck, and my body understood before my mind could protect me. Grant pulled away first because a twig cracked under my sandal. Brielle looked over his shoulder with her mouth still parted, like I had walked into a room she believed already belonged to her. My husband whispered my name, June, and it sounded smaller than every ordinary lie he had carried home. I did not answer because if I opened my mouth, every picnic table would have heard the marriage leave me. The proof was not hidden anymore. It was standing in front of me with her lipstick on his mouth. That was when Owen Rask stepped beside me with an unopened soda and a tired half-smile. He was Brielle's husband, but he did not look shocked. And that was almost worse than the kiss. Grant started toward us with both palms open, while Brielle pressed her fingers beneath her eyes before tears had earned the right to fall. Owen did not raise his voice, but everyone in that small circle obeyed when he said, "Don't give them the scene they planned." I turned to him because planned was not a wounded word, and the way Grant went still made it sound like evidence. Grant drove us home from Sauvie Island with both hands on the wheel and the radio turned low. He did not mention Brielle, Owen, the trees, or the way my face had gone empty when he reached for me near the parking lot. Halfway across the bridge, he opened the glove compartment and handed me a folded napkin because my lemonade cup had sweated onto my dress. That small, automatic kindness nearly broke me because it came from the same hand I had just seen on her waist. At home, he set his keys in the blue bowl by the door like every Saturday before that one. He rinsed the picnic containers, asked if I wanted the leftover corn saved, and moved through our kitchen with the patience of a man who believed normal could still be performed well enough to pass. I stood beside the sink and watched water bead on the counter while his voice carried from the refrigerator. "You want tacos later, June, or are you too tired?" I told him I was just tired, and the words came out steady because they were true in every direction. That night, I did not touch his phone, open his private email, or look for a password he had never given me. Owen's warning stayed under my ribs, not as comfort, but as instruction. I opened the laptop we both used for household bills and saved the cabin confirmation Grant had booked under our family account. Then I downloaded the credit card statement I had every right to see. Each file landed in a folder with a date, and the plainness of it kept me from shaking. Grant came upstairs while I was closing the laptop and paused in the doorway longer than he needed to. "Everything okay?" he asked, and I turned off the lamp before my face could answer for me. "I'm organizing some things for work," I said, and he accepted it because men like Grant trust old routines until the room stops obeying them. Later, lying beside him in the dark, I heard his breathing settle, but mine never did. I kept seeing Brielle's fingers behind his neck, Owen's unopened soda in his hand, and the calm in his voice when he said they had planned a scene for me. Owen chose a diner off the Vancouver side of the river, the kind of place with vinyl booths, weak coffee, and nobody from our regular life. He was already there when I walked in, one hand around a mug he had not touched, a brown folder resting flat beside the sugar packets. I sat across from him and kept my purse on my lap because putting it down felt too permanent. He slid the folder toward me and said, "It does not scream, June. It just keeps dates." The first page was a cabin confirmation from Bend, booked through a family discount Grant had access to because of his job. The next was a dinner receipt from the same weekend he told me he was covering a safety training, followed by a cropped photo Brielle had posted where only the edge of Grant's sleeve survived her editing. Nothing in the folder looked dramatic by itself, and that was what made it worse. A lie can hide inside one weekend, but month after month, printed in order, it starts behaving like a second life. I turned another page and found messages Brielle had sent into a small friend thread. Soft little sentences dressed like concern. "June seems distant lately," one read, and another said she worried I might make things uncomfortable if anyone brought up my marriage. My throat closed because those words had been planted before I knew there was anything to defend. Owen watched me read them, then looked down at his coffee when I whispered. She was preparing them for me. That was the first moment I understood the kiss had not been the whole trap. Grant and Brielle were not only sneaking around behind picnic shelters and weekend excuses, they were building a version of me that would make my pain look suspicious when it finally showed. I looked at Owen and asked why he had not told me sooner, and his answer came quiet. "Because I needed you to survive the truth. Not just hear it." He pushed a business card across the table, with Marin Whitlock's name printed cleanly in black. "Before you decide what you feel, know what you can prove," he murmured, and I folded the card into my wallet like something that might keep me standing. Marin Whitlock's office sat above a bakery on a street where people carried coffee, opened umbrellas, and walked past other people's private endings without knowing. I climbed the narrow stairs with Owen's card in my wallet and the folder pressed against my ribs like it could burn through my blouse. Marin was 34, calm, and plain-spoken, with no dramatic promises waiting behind her desk. She looked through the cabin confirmations, the dinner receipts, Brielle's messages, and the family discount record before she looked at me and asked, "What do you want protected first?" I expected the question to be about divorce, but she did not start there. She asked about my paycheck, my personal email, the household bills, the accounts my name appeared on, and whether Grant had access to anything that could damage my work at the library. When I said I wanted the truth out, her eyes stayed on the receipt where Grant had used his job benefit for a weekend I was never meant to see. Truth matters, June, but how you handle it decides whether it helps you or hurts you. She told me not to post, not to threaten, not to send pictures around, and not to touch anything private that was not already mine to access. The sentence landed harder than comfort because it gave my rage a fence to stand behind. I could save the statements I had rights to, preserve the messages Owen had been sent, change my own passwords, open a separate paycheck account, and document every shared bill without making myself look reckless. When I asked if that meant I had to let them keep smiling, Marin tapped Brielle's soft little warning about me making people uncomfortable and said, "No, it means you stop feeding the story she already wrote." That night, Grant noticed the email alert from my bank before I had even finished washing my face. He stood in the bedroom doorway and asked why I was changing passwords, his voice gentle enough to sound innocent if I had not seen his hand on Brielle's waist. I folded the towel over the rack and told him I was organizing my life. And the words felt clean because they did not ask him for permission. He watched me for a second too long, then nodded like old routines still belonged to him. But the room had already started answering to me. The next dinner was supposed to feel smaller, safer, ordinary enough for everyone to pretend the picnic had only been a strange silence nobody wanted to name. It was in a friend's backyard in Portland, with one long table, salad bowls, sliced bread, and sweating bottles of sparkling water. Grant arrived beside me like a husband still allowed to guide his wife through a gate, palm hovering at my back. Brielle was already there, smiling at him before she remembered to smile at me. She made the first cut while passing tomatoes, light enough that anyone else could call it harmless. "Grant saved my backdrop rack last week." She laughed, like I could not hear the private ease tucked inside his name. He looked down with that modest little smile people wear when they want credit without asking. Then he rested his hand on my shoulder and murmured, "You okay?" June. And I understood exactly what they wanted from me. The table went quiet in that watchful way people use when they are waiting to see who becomes the problem. My fork felt heavy, and for one hot second, I wanted to say every date in Owen's folder out loud. I wanted to name the cabin, the receipt, the cropped photo, and the friend thread where Brielle had already made room for my breakdown. Instead, I carried my empty glass toward the kitchen because Marin's warning was still stronger than my anger. Owen met me near the sink without pretending he needed water. His voice stayed low when he said, "She wants your volume, not your truth." And the sentence landed because Brielle's performance was still warm behind us. I walked back out, set my glass beside Grant's plate, and said, "I am not discussing my marriage at a dinner table someone else helped set." Brielle's face changed before she could cover it, and later Della offered to shift my library schedule if I needed room. A kindness that stayed longer than dinner. That night, Owen called after finding picnic photos on Brielle's business page, family tradition sessions written above faces that never agreed to become her advertisement. Marin did not write the email like a woman trying to win a fight. She wrote it like someone closing a door before anyone could claim the hallway belonged to them. I sat beside her desk while she trimmed every hot word out of my first draft and left only what could stand on its own. "My consent to use my image is withdrawn," she read, and I realized how small a sentence could be while still moving an entire room. The email went to the people directly affected, not the whole world. It went to the friends whose faces appeared in Brielle's picnic photos, the community contact who had considered featuring her family tradition sessions, and Grant through the proper channel because Marin wanted every step clean. Owen sent his own request from his side, quiet and exact, with the links Brielle had used and the dates the photos had been posted. No one called it scandal in writing, and that restraint made the facts harder to dismiss. The first cancellation reached Brielle before dinner. A mother from our circle pulled her family session because she did not want her children used in another advertisement without permission. By morning, the little cafe that had planned to host Brielle's sample wall removed her announcement from its board. The kayak center did not fire Grant, but they took him off family booking privileges while they reviewed how he had used the discount account. Each consequence matched the thing they had touched: trust, access, consent, and none of it needed my anger to explain it. Grant came home with his jaw tight and his phone still in his hand. "Did Owen put you up to this?" he asked, like the man whose mouth had been on my best friend could still make my choices belong to another man. I dried a plate, set it in the rack, and answered, "No, your choices did." Later, Brielle texted that I was making this ugly, and my thumb hovered over the screen for 1 second before I sent it to Marin instead of answering. For the first time since the picnic, silence did not feel like swallowing pain. It felt like refusing to hand them another sentence they could use. Grant asked to meet at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the library, public enough to look decent and quiet enough for him to try softening me. He was already at a corner table when I arrived, wearing the gray sweater I had bought him after our first winter in Portland. For 1 second, that sweater hurt more than Brielle's text because it belonged to a life where I still thought knowing someone's size meant knowing his heart. He stood when I came in and murmured, "Thanks for meeting me, June." Like courtesy could rinse the rest of it clean. He slid 1 folded page across the table before my coffee even cooled. It was a mutual statement, neat and gentle, saying our marriage had suffered from distance, that we both hoped for privacy, and that neither of us wanted blame assigned. I read the sentence we both contributed to the distance twice because the words were dressed like peace while carrying his escape inside them. Grant watched my face and whispered, "We do not have to ruin each other," as if I had been the one booking cabins with another woman. I thought of the receipts in Owen's folder, Brielle's messages about my mood, and the family discount Grant had used for weekends I never knew existed. The paper in my hand was not an apology. It was the last version of the trap, just cleaner and printed. I folded it once, slowly, because throwing it would have given him the woman they kept rehearsing. "I will not lie gently so you can leave clean," I said, and his eyes dropped before his mouth could answer. Grant tried memory after that. The old apartment, the cheap couch, the winter we ate soup from paper bowls because every real dish was still packed. I let those memories stand because some of them were true, and truth did not become false just because he did. But the woman sitting across from him had also seen Brielle's name beside his, her warning messages beside my reputation, and his silence beside every chance to stop. Later, Owen called to say his separation papers were moving, and neither of us pretended our shared damage needed to become romance. That same week, Della asked if I would lead a quiet evening reading group at the library, and for the first time, I said maybe without feeling like I was asking permission to survive. A year later, I did not go back to Sauvie Island to prove I could stand where Grant had kissed Brielle. I went to a different picnic, at a small East Portland park, where library volunteers spread sandwiches and passed grapes in plastic containers. Della waved me over with lemonade, and nobody at that table knew how to turn my face into a question. The grass smelled sharp under the sun. Children ran near the shade. And for once, a picnic did not feel like a place where I had to brace. By then, the divorce was almost finished, and Marin had kept every ugly thing moving through clean, careful legal channels. Grant had left the kayak center after they removed him from family bookings and community events, because trust is part of that work, every single day. He was living in a small apartment in Beaverton, sending occasional messages that Marin answered when they needed an answer at all. Brielle lost the cafe wall, then several clients, because parents remembered the picnic photos she had used without permission. And consent is a quiet word until someone breaks it. Owen and I still checked in now and then, but we never tried to make our damage look like destiny. His separation from Brielle became final before mine did, and when he told me he had moved closer to Forest Park, I heard relief instead of romance. We had survived the same lie from opposite sides, and that was enough to make us careful with each other. Some stories do not need a new couple at the end. Sometimes the honest ending is two people learning not to confuse rescue with love. Grant called me one evening while I was folding towels in the apartment I had chosen for myself. I almost let it ring out, but the room was quiet, and I trusted my own pulse enough to answer. "Do you ever miss us?" "June," he asked, and the question found the part of me that still remembered our first winter in Portland. The gray sweater, the cheap couch, the soup in paper bowls. I looked at the towels, the new key on my counter, and the space where fear used to sit, then answered. I miss who I was before I had to prove I was not imagining my own life. He did not argue after that, and his silence felt like the door finally learning how to close. I did not hate him in that moment, which surprised me, but I also did not soften into the woman his regret needed. When the call ended, I stood by the little balcony railing while the city moved below me without asking what I had survived. The next week, at the library group Della had asked me to lead, a woman laughed because she had gone a whole afternoon without checking her phone, and everyone understood why that mattered. At the park picnic, Della handed me lemonade and asked, "You good?" And I looked around before I answered. There were no old performances to manage, no soft traps under friendly sentences, no husband touching my shoulder so strangers would measure my reaction. I had lost a marriage, a best friend, and a version of myself that believed peace meant keeping everyone comfortable. I told her, "I'm getting there," and that was the truest happy ending I had ever owned. If this story found you while you are learning how to begin again, I hope you remember this. Peace does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it looks like one honest morning, one safe table, and one life you no longer have to explain. Stay with yourself. You are still becoming